I got to the restaurant 20 minutes early, which was a habit I'd never been able to shake. My mother always said punctuality was a form of respect. I used to believe her. I chose a corner booth at Harlow's, the kind of place with low lighting and real cloth napkins, and a bread basket that arrives before you even ask. I'd made the reservation 3 weeks out. I'd confirmed it twice. I'd even texted my brother the address the night before, with a little map pin attached, because he had a habit of confusing streets in downtown Nashville. The booth fit 6 comfortably. I was the only one in it. I ordered sparkling water and told the server we were expecting 4 more. She smiled and said to take my time. I smoothed the napkin across my lap and watched the door. My brother and his wife were bringing my parents. That was the plan, the whole plan. My 28th birthday dinner, the first one in 3 years where everyone was supposed to be in the same city at the same time. I'd flown in from Portland specifically. I'd booked a hotel 2 blocks away because I didn't want to impose on anyone. I'd bought a new dress, navy blue, the kind that looks like you tried without trying too hard. I'd done my hair. I sat in that booth for 45 minutes before I looked at my phone. There was one text. From my brother. Sent 11 minutes ago. Hey, so, Mom and Dad had something come up. We're probably not going to make it tonight. Sorry. Range check? I read it 3 times. Then I set the phone face down on the table and looked at the bread basket. The bread was still warm. I knew because I'd touched the cloth covering it just to have something to do with my hands. Rain check. On my birthday. From my family. I picked the phone back up. I typed, what came up, and then I deleted it. I typed, are you serious? And deleted that too. I sat there for another minute. And then I put $60 on the table. Enough to cover the sparkling water. And a tip that felt like an apology to the server for wasting her booth. And I walked out. I didn't cry in the restaurant. I didn't cry on the sidewalk either. Even though the October air hit me wrong, and I'd left my jacket on the seat beside me, like I'd expected someone to sit there. I walked the 2 blocks to my hotel. I rode the elevator up to the 4th floor. I sat on the edge of the bed in my navy blue dress, and I stared at the wall. And then I thought about my cat, Biscuit. He was at home in Portland, probably asleep on my pillow right now, completely unbothered. I wished, not for the first time, that I'd just stayed home with him. Here is what you need to understand about my family before any of this makes sense. I am the oldest. My brother is 4 years younger, and he has always been, in the language of my family, the one who needed protecting, not because anything particularly bad ever happened to him, but because he was sensitive as a kid, and my parents built their whole parenting philosophy around his sensitivity. And somewhere along the way, I became the one who was simply expected to manage. I don't say this with bitterness. Or at least, I'm trying not to. I say it because it's the context without which nothing else I'm about to tell you will make any sense. When I was 19, I took out a loan to help my parents keep their house in Clarksville. My father had been laid off the year before, and they were 3 months behind on the mortgage. I was working 2 jobs and going to community college, and I had just enough credit, apparently, to be useful. My mother cried when I signed the paperwork. She said she would pay me back. She said I was her rock. She said she didn't know what she would do without me. I'm still waiting on that payment. I stopped counting at $14,000. When I was 22, my brother got his girlfriend pregnant. They were not in a position to handle it. He was unemployed, and she had just started nursing school. And so my parents asked me to move back home for 8 months to help. I did. I slept on the pull-out couch in the den, and I babysat, and I covered groceries, and I drove my sister-in-law to her clinical rotations 3 mornings a week because she didn't have a car yet. She is a good person, my sister-in-law. I want to be clear about that. She never asked me to do any of it. She always looked a little embarrassed that I was there. It was my parents who'd arranged the whole thing, and my brother who'd accepted it without seeming to register that it was a significant sacrifice for me to make. When I was 25, my parents wanted to take my brother and his family to Disney World for my nephew's 3rd birthday. They couldn't afford it. They asked if I could contribute. I gave them $800 and told myself it was a gift for my nephew, not a subsidy for a trip I wasn't invited on. I was not invited on the trip. The photos they posted on Facebook were very nice. By the time I turned 28, I had been the family's financial and emotional emergency contact for nearly a decade. I had co-signed, covered, driven, sacrificed, rearranged, and shown up. I had not missed a single birthday, graduation, or holiday. Not one. I flew home for Easter. I sent anniversary cards. I called every Sunday. And when my birthday came around, my 28th, a perfectly ordinary number, not a milestone, just a day I'd wanted to mark with the people who were supposed to matter most, they sent my brother to cancel via text. Rain check. I lay back on the hotel bed in my dress and looked at the ceiling for a long time. I should tell you about the cosign. 6 weeks before my birthday dinner, my brother called me. Not a text, an actual phone call, which meant he wanted something significant. He and my sister-in-law were trying to buy a house. They'd found a place in Murfreesboro, decent school district, good price, needed some work. The problem was their debt-to-income ratio. They needed a cosigner on the mortgage to get approved. He asked if I would do it. I remember sitting at my kitchen table in Portland, looking out the window at the neighbor's maple tree, which was just starting to turn. I remember thinking, I'm $38,000 in debt from my own student loans. I'm renting a one-bedroom apartment. I have a cat and a used Subaru and a savings account. I've been nursing carefully for 4 years. I said yes anyway, because that's what I did. I said yes, and I filled out the paperwork, and I had the notarized documents sent to the lender by FedEx, and I didn't tell anyone how much it had cost me. Not in money, but in sleep, in the low-grade anxiety of having my financial future tied to a house I'd never live in. I didn't say any of that. I just helped. My brother thanked me in a text. You're the best. Seriously. My parents said nothing, which I understood to mean they considered it a given. The morning after the birthday dinner, or the dinner that wasn't, I woke up at 6 a.m. with that particular hollowness that comes from crying yourself to sleep. I'd taken the dress off at some point. Biscuit wasn't there to sleep on my feet. The hotel room had that anonymous stillness that makes you feel like you could be anyone, anywhere, living any life. I made bad coffee with the little machine on the dresser, and I sat in the chair by the window, and I watched Nashville wake up. My phone had 4 messages. One from my sister-in-law, which said, I'm so sorry about last night. Are you okay? One from a friend in Portland who'd sent birthday memes at midnight. One from my aunt, my dad's sister, who lives in Baton Rouge, and is the only person in my extended family who has ever seemed to notice me, which said, Happy birthday, sweetheart. Hope you treated yourself today. And one from my mother, sent at 9:47 the previous night. Hope you had a good birthday, honey. We'll celebrate when we're all together at Thanksgiving. That was it. No explanation for why they hadn't come. No acknowledgement that anything had been canceled. No apology. We'll celebrate at Thanksgiving. As if the reservation hadn't existed. As if the $60 hadn't been left on a table. As if I hadn't flown from Portland and put on a dress and sat alone in a restaurant with a breadbasket for 45 minutes. I read that message 4 times, and then I set my phone on the windowsill, and I made myself finish the bad coffee. I made myself breathe. I looked out at the street below, at the delivery trucks, and the early morning joggers, and the city just going about its business, completely indifferent to the specific shape of my grief. And I made a decision. Not an angry decision. Not a revenge decision. Or at least, not the way I'd usually use that word. It was quieter than that. It was the decision of a person who has finally run out of reasons to keep doing what she's been doing. I picked up my phone, I opened my email, and I wrote to the mortgage lender. I want to be precise about what I did, because I've told this story to a few people, and some of them have assumed I did something dramatic. I didn't. The home loan hadn't closed yet. They were still in the underwriting process. My brother had mentioned this 2 weeks before, asking if I'd received any additional paperwork requests. I had. I'd dealt with them promptly because that's what I do. But the loan hadn't closed. What I did was this. I sent an email to the lender explaining that I needed to withdraw my cosigner agreement. I cited a change in my own financial circumstances, which was vague but true. My anxiety about the arrangement had been affecting my ability to sleep and make clear decisions, and I'd recently learned that co-signing this particular loan would impact my ability to apply for my own mortgage within the next 2 years, something I was now actively planning. All of this was accurate. None of it was a lie. I then called the lender directly to confirm receipt of the email and ask about next steps. The woman I spoke to was professional and calm. She explained that the underwriting process would need to pause and the borrowers would be notified. She gave me a timeline. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat with it for a moment. I'm not going to pretend I felt nothing. I felt a lot of things. I felt the particular nausea of having done something irreversible. I felt a cold, settling clarity. I felt sad, genuinely sad, because what I'd just done would hurt my sister-in-law, who deserved better than to be collateral in a dynamic she hadn't created. But underneath all of that, for the first time in a very long time, I also felt like myself. Like the version of me that existed before I learned that love in my family was something you earned by making yourself useful. I flew home to Portland that afternoon. I took a cab to the airport, returned my rental car, sat in the terminal with a breakfast burrito I didn't finish. My phone was quiet the whole time. The quiet lasted until 6:53 p.m. when I was somewhere over Northern California. I landed in Portland at 8:32. I had 17 missed calls, 12 from my brother, 3 from my mother, 1 from my father, which was notable because my father did not call people. He sent emails. He sent physical cards, occasionally. He did not call. And 1 from my sister-in-law. I listened to her voicemail first, standing at the baggage claim, my rolling suitcase at my feet. Her voice was careful and steady. She was a nurse. She'd learned to sound that way, but I could hear something shaking underneath it. She said, "Hey, I know something happened with the loan. I don't fully understand it yet. I just wanted to hear your voice. Call me when you can." I sat down on a bench near the carousel. The bags from my flight were starting to come through. I watched them go around, and I thought about how to explain what could not quite be explained. How a person can be loved in theory and erased in practice. How you can give and give until the giving becomes the only thing anyone knows you for. How at some point the kindest thing you can do is stop. I didn't call anyone back that night. I took a rideshare home. I unlocked my apartment door and Biscuit was right there. Of course he was, because he always is. That's the thing about cats that the comment section of the internet is completely right about. And he walked in 2 tight circles around my feet, and then sat down and looked at me like he was conducting an assessment. I put my bag down. I sat on the kitchen floor. He climbed onto my lap and started purring, which is his way of saying, "I see you," without making it weird. I sat there for a while, just breathing. My brother called again the next morning. I let it ring. He called twice more before noon. Then he sent a text. "I really need to talk to you. This is serious." I wrote back, "I know. I'm not ready yet." He responded, "When?" I didn't answer. My mother's text came in waves. The first wave was confused. "What's going on with the loan?" "Your brother is very, very upset." The second wave was concerned. "Are you okay? Why aren't you answering?" By the third wave, something had shifted. "This is really unfair of you. They were counting on that house." That one I read several times. I set my phone on the counter and went to make tea and stood in my kitchen looking out at the backyard of the apartment building. A small square of patchy grass with a dying rosebush in the corner, and I thought about the word unfair. I thought about being 19 and signing loan documents in a bank lobby while my mother cried. I thought about sleeping on a pull-out couch for 8 months. I thought about $800 for a trip to Disney World I wasn't invited on. I thought about a corner booth at Harlow's and a bread basket going cold and a text that said rain check, like I was a dentist appointment that could be shuffled to next Tuesday. I thought about my mother's birthday message. "We'll celebrate at Thanksgiving." This is really unfair of you. I put the phone in a drawer. I drank my tea. I let Biscuit sit on the kitchen table, which I normally didn't allow, but he seemed to understand that today was an exception. My father called on day 3. I answered, which surprised both of us. He didn't say hello. He said, "What did you do?" Not angry. My father was never dramatic about anger. He said it the way he'd say it if I'd accidentally left the gate open and the dog got out. Matter of fact, waiting for the explanation that would make it fixable. I said, "I withdrew from the cosign." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "You know they might not get the loan without you." "I know. You understand what that means for them." "I do." Another pause. I could hear him breathing. Outside my window, a crow landed on the fence, and then immediately left, apparently finding nothing of interest. Why? He asked. And I'd thought about this. I'd thought about it a lot, in the 72 hours between Nashville and this phone call, sitting on my kitchen floor with my cat and my bad hotel coffee, and the replaying memory of a booth that held 6 people and was filled by one. I'd thought about what I would say if someone finally asked me the real question. Because I sat in a restaurant alone on my birthday. I said, and no one came. And no one explained why. And the only message I got from Mom was that we'd celebrate at Thanksgiving. And I realized I've been making myself available to this family for 10 years, and I didn't even rate a phone call. He was quiet for longer this time. That's not the same thing, he said, finally. I know, I said. To you, it's not. But to me, it's exactly the same thing. He didn't respond to that. We stayed on the phone in silence for a few more seconds. Long enough that I thought he might say something real, something that cracked the particular casing he'd been sealed in for as long as I could remember. But then he said he'd talk to my mother. And then he hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand for a moment. Then I put it down. Then I went and looked up flights to Reykjavik, because I had always wanted to go, and I had finally, at 28 years old, stopped waiting for a good enough reason. My sister-in-law and I talked on day 5. She called in the evening, and I answered this time. She asked how I was. I told her honestly that I'd been better, but that I was okay. She said that was fair. Then she said, I want you to know I'm not calling to change your mind. I wasn't sure I'd heard her right. Okay, I'm calling because. She stopped. I could hear her choosing her words carefully. Because I've been in this family long enough to understand what the last 10 years probably looked like for you. And I wanted to say that I see it. Even if nobody else is saying it out loud. I didn't say anything for a moment. I was standing at my kitchen window again, looking at the patchy yard and the dying rosebush. Biscuit was on the counter behind me, which he was also not supposed to be on. But again, exceptions. Thank you, I said. That means a lot. We're going to figure out the loan, she said. It'll be harder, but we'll figure it out. I don't want you to carry that. I'm sorry it landed on you. It didn't, she said. It landed on them. There's a difference. We talked for another 20 minutes about nothing important. Her shifts at the hospital. My nephew's new thing where he only wanted to eat orange foods. Whether the rosebush in my yard was salvageable. She thought maybe, with the right pruning. By the time we hung up, I felt lighter than I had in days. She is a good person, my sister-in-law. I've said it before and I'll keep saying it. It has been 4 months since Nashville. My brother and his wife found a different lender. A credit union with slightly different underwriting requirements. The loan was harder to get and the terms were less favorable, but they got it. They moved into the house in Murfreesboro in January. My sister-in-law sent me a photo of my nephew in the backyard, standing in a pile of leaves with a look of pure, uncontained joy on his face. I saved it to my phone. I have not spoken to my mother since the phone call with my father, which is not something I planned. It happened gradually, the way some distances do. She has texted periodically. I have responded briefly when it seemed necessary and let the rest sit in silence. My father sent a card for my birthday, a week late, a Hallmark card with a mountain on it that said thinking of you. He signed it with just his first name, which is a thing that probably meant something and probably meant nothing, and I have stopped trying to decode the difference. I went to Reykjavik in February. I booked a small guest house, the kind with a shared kitchen and wooden beams, and one of those windows that looks directly at the sky. It was cold in a clean way, the kind of cold that doesn't apologize for itself. I walked for hours every day. I ate fish soup in a harbor restaurant, with my book propped against a water glass. I saw the northern lights twice, once faintly, like someone had smudged green chalk across the horizon, and once, on my second-to-last night, very clearly, in full arcing curtains of green and violet that move the way water moves when it's alive. I stood outside in the freezing cold and looked up at something enormous and indifferent and beautiful. And I thought, I built this. I am here because I chose to come here, not because someone invited me. Not as the helpful oldest daughter, the family emergency contact, the person who co-signs and covers and shows up and never asks for anything back. Just me. Just because I wanted to. I've been back in Portland for 2 months now. The rosebush in the backyard turned out to be something salvageable. My sister-in-law was right. It needed pruning and some new soil and a little patience. It has 6 new shoots coming in. Biscuit has claimed the windowsill closest to it and spends approximately 4 hours a day monitoring its progress. I've been thinking lately about the word priority, not in the way it was used against me, not in the bruise of that rain check text, not in the 10 years of being last in line, but in its original sense. What you actually put first. What you protect. For a long time, I protected everyone else's version of our family. The version where I was reliable and available and uncomplaining. The version where my needs were optional and my presence was convenient and my limits were not something anyone needed to consider. I protected that version at real cost to myself. Financial, emotional, the particular loneliness of being surrounded by people who don't actually see you. I don't protect that version anymore. What I protect now is different. It's smaller, in some ways. A 1-bedroom apartment in Portland, a cat, a rosebush coming back, a savings account I'm no longer rating for emergencies that aren't mine. But it's also more solid than anything I've built before. When I come home, it's home. When something good happens, I feel it without immediately calculating who else needs it more. I am not at peace with everything. I want to be honest about that. There are nights when I lie awake and replay conversations I could have had differently and choices I could have made sooner, and the specific silence of a phone that doesn't ring on your birthday. I don't think those nights are going to disappear. I think grief about family is the kind that sits with you permanently, that you carry differently over time rather than putting down. But I am at peace with my decision. I am at peace with the morning in the Nashville hotel room when I sat by the window with bad coffee and finally, quietly, decided to treat myself the way I had been treating everyone else. Like someone worth showing up for. I opened my laptop last week and started a savings account specifically labeled Iceland, round 2. I don't know when. I don't know who, if anyone, I'll bring along. But I know I'll go.